Okay, I call this meeting to order of the Colorado Forest Health Council Legislative Committee. I am Larimer County Commissioner Jody Shattuck McNally, Chair of this committee, and let's do roll call. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to run down the list. First, Samantha Albert. And Samantha let me know she was sick and wouldn't be making it. Christy Belton.
I'm here. Morning.
Good morning, Christy. Pat Dorsey. Looks like Pat's out. Director Matt McCombs.
Present.
Morning, Matt. Commissioner Jody Shattuck McNally.
Present.
Hi, Jody. Mark Morgan.
Present.
Thanks, Mark. Julie Stensel.
Good morning here.
Good morning. And Councilmember Sylvan White Skunk. Not here. And I see we have Katie. And Katie, I just want to confirm that you're wanting to stay an observing member as opposed to a voting member. I know you've been really present on the committee, so I wanted to double check.
I would be open to joining as a more formal committee member. I feel like I'll probably be here for the foreseeable future.
Okay, great. I don't know if there's any sort of formal process. I'm happy just to move you to a different place on the list then. Perfect.
Awesome. Yeah, if that's all it takes.
Yeah. All right. Well, we do have quorum, so that's great.
Great. And so did we move Katie over to formal member today, or did we think they have I don't know, is there a formal process for that? Okay, cool. So now we have 7 members or 8?
So we now, there are 9 people on the committee.
And Pat's here.
Great. So now we have 7 of the 9 present.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you all for being here today. Appreciate everyone's service on this committee. I do see we have a message from Councilmember White Skunk. It says Tuesday. I'm not sure what that means. Let's, anybody have any questions or concerns or additions, changes to the minutes? Okay, seeing none, I would welcome a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
A second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Okay.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, that passes. All right, so let's move on to our next agenda item, which is the action after review of our previous work, the previous session. Now it's over and we're moving on to the next one. And I believe Courtney and maybe Angela and Director McCombs were going to lead that conversation, maybe some of James too, or who's going to lead that conversation?
So I think in terms of reviewing the successes of the session, James and Daphne, we're going to talk about some of the bills that were successfully passed and where they are now. And then in terms of how the process went, I know Director McCombs had some ideas about the process, so I thought maybe he could lead that part of the discussion.
Sounds good.
Commissioner Shattuck McNally, if it works for you, I'm happy to kick it off.
Sure. How about you do that, Daphne? Because I know that you guys have a lot of notes and things we're on the ground, literally inside the Capitol for a lot of this work. So why don't you kick it off and we'll go from there. I'm just trying to see, I see Councilmember White Skunk has been saying some emails. Courtney, I'm trying to understand what he was saying. It says Tuesday. So I was trying to understand it. He's trying to get on or not.
Responding to an email from a different committee.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure we weren't missing him. All right, thank you. So proceed, Daphne. Thanks for being here today. And maybe you should introduce yourself for when we'd have these meetings, so not everyone knows. We have the roll call, but maybe introduce yourself for the record. Thank you.
For sure. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Daphne Gervais. I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs with the Department of Natural Resources. It's good to see you all this morning. It has been a while, and I will say that joining you makes me feel like I need to face the inevitable truth that the next legislative session is around the corner at this point. So look forward to joining you on a more regular basis in the upcoming weeks. But I understand for today, you all are interested in getting a status update on the bills that you were tracking last legislative session, and also kind of a look forward on what to expect in the upcoming session. So I'm glad to share what I know so far. We are still waiting to learn more on both that implementation side and also on the bill development side. So apologies in advance if this isn't as much detail as you all are hoping for, but I'm happy to join you in future meetings as we're learning more. So just to get started with status updates, one of the bills that I think you all were tangentially interested in was House Bill 1069. That was the bill to study the use of biochar for plugging oil and gas wells. So as you all know, biochar is a pretty new technology. It could present several opportunities, and legislators are pretty interested in figuring out how we can put biochar to beneficial use. So this bill specifically looked at the role of biochar in potentially reducing emissions in the oil and gas industry. So a little bit more detail, the bill formed an advisory group. It has several different subject matter experts on it, industry representatives, local governments, environmental justice communities. There's also state agencies, including the Energy Office, the State Forest Service, the Department of Public Health and Environment. So it's a really robust group of folks. And the goal is really to have CSU lead a research project. So they're going to be looking at peer-reviewed scientific articles and existing studies and existing laws, both at the federal level and in other states, just to kind of give like a comprehensive overview of where we're at right now with biochar and what we know as far as its potential uses in the oil and gas industry. And then ultimately, CSU will be presenting their research results to this advisory group, and the advisory group will determine, based on those results, whether they think that we should do a pilot program to test this technology on the ground. If the advisory group does decide they want to do a pilot program, they will direct CSU to provide recommendations on what that pilot program should look like, how it should be structured, and so on and so forth. So this bill is in the pretty early stages of implementation. The advisory group has been appointed. The CSU research team has been identified. There have been a couple of meetings so far. And it seems like they're kind of just in that level setting stage and kicking off this project. CSU has until June of 2024 to provide their research results to the group. And then those potential recommendations on a pilot program would come in December of next year. Any questions on that one?
Thank you, Daphne, sorry. And I think I attended as a county commissioner, one of those stakeholder meetings with State Senator Lisa Cutter, but I'm not sure which, she invited me as a commissioner because I brought some of our staff that are working on this, and I'm not sure if that was related to this or another bill that she's doing, so I have to circle back on that. So, but I didn't do it as a Forest Health Council, as a county commissioner in the work that we're doing in our county, so.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Jody, because in a little bit here, we'll be talking about bills that we're expecting in the next legislative session, and Senator Cutter is working on another biochar study, so we'll talk a little bit about that later. Seeing no questions on this one, moving on to the next one, I wanted to update all of you on DNR's priority bill from last session on stream restoration. You guys probably recall we initiated Senate Bill 270, and our goal was to create a clear legal path for stream restoration projects, just given like increasing uncertainty about what projects might require an augmentation plan or a substitute water supply plan, essentially what projects would require a water right, and recognizing that that uncertainty kind of put a damper on the progress that was being made on the ground as far as, the volume and the quality of projects. DNR introduced a bill last session to codify that if your project is restoring the stream to its historical footprint, or basically, the extent of the stream in some past history that can be demonstrated with evidence, then you would not need a water right. I think I updated you all over the course of last session. You know that the bill went through some pretty significant modifications over the course of our negotiations with stakeholders. Ultimately, we ended up providing protection only for minor restoration activities. So that includes projects to daylight a stream or stabilize banks or grade a stream. Importantly, though, we also covered restoration activities that are following natural disasters like floods and fires. We know that these stream restoration activities can have, a huge impact on sediment flow or just water quality in general following those events. So we're really pleased to have covered those as well. So we made significant progress. That said, we do know that there's more work to be done in this space. I will say that the overwhelming majority of stakeholders that we have heard from, including us, believe that we kind of need to see how Senate Bill 270 plays out, make sure we understand where the gaps still exist in the law, and really think through collectively what the best approach is moving forward. So with that in mind, DNR is not pursuing legislation and, stream restoration 2.0 in the upcoming session. But we are really looking forward to continued conversations with water users and restoration practitioners and other stakeholders that have been part of the conversation. So that is all I have for status updates. I know James wanted to update you all on a couple of other bills, and then we can move into what's ahead.
Sounds great. Thank you, Daphne. And it's great to see you.
Thank you.
Looks like you might even be in the Capitol or somewhere close. So, no?
Not yet.
Okay. Maybe that's a good thing. So, James, would love to hear from you now.
Thank you, and thanks, Daphne. So the two bills that I wanted to touch base on are the two that we've been following for about the last kind of 6 months, ever since they became law. The first one is Senate Bill 1060, and that's the funding for the nursery upgrades. Two very big updates on that one, I think. One, our finance manager has let me know that we actually did receive that money, so that is in our account. It's ready to go. And and the other update is, I think the last time we had spoken, I was saying that we were still going through the process of hiring a contractor to kind of look at that work to figure out what it looks like. Ultimately, we went with the CSU facilities. They're going to handle that contract. We're estimating about 6 months-ish to do all of the design work and get it ready to go out to bid. But we're not anticipating work going to start until next summer. But we are moving along and it's chugging. And so I think that's a really good sign for the nursery, and hopefully we get that. Hopefully it stays on time and we get that going sometime next year. The other update that I had was with Senate Bill 005. And I think Courtney had asked somebody from the Department of Higher Education and the community college system. Unfortunately, they weren't able to be here, only because I think that's where the most progress has been made, was on that front. I do know that they actually sent out, I'm going to call it an RFP because I have no other way to define it, but to expand or create new forestry programs at their community colleges. I know that actually went live sometime in August, late August, early September. And so those have started to come in. I do know that off the top of my head, CSU probably did put on a bid just because they did reach out via extension. And then I know that Front Range Community College has expressed expanding some of their stuff. As far as the kind of commitment that the Forest Service has to Senate Bill 5, we do have a role to play in educational materials. I do know that members of our team have met to start going over what those education materials need to look like and kind of the information they need to have. Again, just a reminder, this is just to go to every high school, and the counselors have access to what jobs are out there in the forestry nexus, whether that be timber, whether that be forestry, anything like that, wildfire mitigation, just having access to that educational material in high school so counselors can pass that out to kids. Jody, I see you have a question. Is that about this bill or is this about something later?
This is about this bill, if you wouldn't mind. I
Okay.
don't mean to stop you.
No, no,
Um,
no. Go ahead.
So this kind of connection. So I was in a meeting earlier this week with CSU Warner College, a fire authority and the chief, and they brought me along because they're looking for support and funding. But they are actually talking about getting down into the schools and the guidelines counselors to promote this this opportunity that they're doing. And I said, well, we should connect you with it says already Senate Bill 5 happening. Maybe we should connect you so you're doing it. So what's happening in that bill or this endeavor, which is a pilot program here in Larimer, is the fire chief is providing housing inside the firehouses, like dorm housing, and they're paying paid internships for students to come and do 12 weeks of mitigation work around some of these more remote firehouses. And so that's going to be at 3 locations. And so they were talking about getting this information out. And I thought, well, that would not make sense to have 2 sets of information. And so I thought maybe it would be prudent to kind of see if you guys could overlap and maybe connect. So can I connect you, or should I connect Courtney, you? Who should I connect so we're not like duplicating efforts? Because they're looking to reach out and share about some of these things as well. And I thought, well, if they have this, they're talking about the careers, and if they're sending out information about careers and you're sending out information careers, I just want to make sure there's not some kind of nexus to collaborate. So just wondering about that. So I could connect them to you or Courtney or Director McCombs. Who should I do that to? And I think this is part of some of the work that I thought maybe someone from your office, but I'm not sure. I'll have to go back and look at the guest list. I was just kind of added on. So that's what I'm wondering. To you, or who should I?
I think probably a handful of people. I think definitely make sure that I'm connected to those people. That way I can integrate them with our communications team, just to make sure that we're all on the same message. I think writ large, probably having Courtney connected might make sense, just because she's going to have access to this committee, and kind of we might be able to meld some ideas together and push that to not only the Forest Service, but also to Larimer County. And so I would say definitely connect me, and sorry to volunteer Courtney. I don't know if she wants it, but I'll leave it up to her.
I'm just trying to connect just to make sure that we're kind of aligning and not kind of working on silos along each other, and maybe there's a chance for, and I do think one of the people in that room was Colorado State Forest Service. So maybe you guys are already involved. I just don't, maybe it hasn't written up. It's a pilot program. So cool. All right. Thanks. Appreciate it. Sorry to stop you, but I just thought there was a chance to connect. So
I saw you come on camera, Director. Okay. Just wanted to give a thumbs up.
No, we're good. Where these things are linked, Commissioner. So Warner College is aware of both the high school outreach materials piece as well as the industry internship piece. So we'll be coordinating certainly internally.
okay, great. Because when I brought it up, it didn't seem to, I didn't get a lot of head nods. So just want to make sure. So, but it could be that I wasn't speaking the same lingo, but I think it was Katie Switzer. Is that?
Yep. So Kristen Switzer
Kristen,
is our
sorry.
experiential learning specialist, and so her and Danielle Ardrier, who does our project learning tree, Danielle's out on maternity leave, so I think there probably is a little bit of a drop there, but we've had some higher level conversations at the dean's level at the executive committee. So I could say that the dean and the associate dean team are aware, and so we'll absolutely make sure we're coordinating on any type of outreach. Their focus is a little bit more on recruitment for programming. So whereas ours is more about awareness for opportunities that exist both with academic paths, but also non-academic paths, in particular for industry, where we're talking about young people that are interested in getting a CDL and immediately getting into operator status and operating equipment. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there as it relates to who the targeted audiences are. Ours will be more broad, but we'll make sure that we're integrated with Warner for sure.
Awesome. I appreciate that. I just, anytime I see dots that maybe can be connected, I'm going to try to do that. So forgive me. That's kind of one of my
it's helpful.
questions, so.
It is. I appreciate
Well,
you
I'm
calling it
anxious.
out.
Well, and they're going to look for us to support or expand. So I got to figure out how we do that in this landscape. So thank you. Appreciate
You
it.
bet.
Sorry, James, but thank you for letting me ask those questions. So your next item.
Just some minor follow-up on Senate Bill 5. The other thing that the CSFS was tasked with was this internship program. The director kind of touched base on that one. We're working our way through that, trying to figure out how we're going to administer that program, because this isn't just internships via the State Forest Service. This is private contractors can reach out, hire interns, and we will cover part of that cost to actually hire the interns. So we're chugging along, trying to figure out how that program is going to be implemented. I do know that Aaron Green and our team has met with a few people. I don't have a complete update on where we are in that process, but I know that it's starting to move along. And once that program's up and running, I'll be sure to kind of bring that update to this group, just so this group actually has a lot of access to opportunities. And if we can plug in some of those students with some of these people here, I think it'd be a really good nexus. And so as we start to kind of more formalize what that plan looks like, I'll be sure to bring that to this group.
Angela.
Yeah, thanks. Just a quick question. Any conversation about housing that program in the wood utilization and marketing program? I feel like it would be nice for, I mean, you already have all the contacts there, right? And, you know, you could say like, hey, we can give you loans. We can also give you interns. Just curious.
Yeah, absolutely. Tim will have, it'll be Tim and Megan Maxwell, I think is the new Molly Pitts at CTIA. Those will kind of be the two key partners, is just making sure that the industry association is making this opportunity available, and Tim will provide his unique skills and relationships to make sure that it's tracked and successful. And we'll just sort of nexus it a little bit with some of our it'll be our Christian Switzer, so who's running the internship program for the agency and has sort of a playbook. So it'll just be a nexus between those folks.
Great. Thanks.
You bet.
Great question. Thank you. Okay, James, do you have any other items?
That's the only update I have from the bills that were passed last year that were going into implementation phase.
Great. Well, very exciting. Thank you for those updates. Okay, so are we moving on to Director McCombs for after action then after that? Because I think we're going to talk about wildfire interim committee progression after this discussion, correct?
Jody, I think Courtney might have had an update on one other bill from last session. And then
Okay.
If it works for Director McCombs, I can also kick off the discussion on the interim committee.
Sounds great. So Courtney, what do you have to add?
Oh, yeah. So I was going to share a little bit about the funding that came in for COSWAP. And so there was 1 million that came in through Senate Bill 5, also for workforce development. And that's something that we're still wrapping into our sort of long-term planning for how we distribute COSWAP funds. So that 1 million is specifically earmarked for the workforce development program, where we contract directly with the SWIFT teams and the conservation corps. COSWAP did just release its 2023 workforce development application in August, and we had the application period close at the end of September for the conservation corps, and it'll close at the end of October for the SWIFT crews and the training opportunities. We are also making a long-term plan for releasing COSWAP funds annually. We haven't quite decided if each opportunity will be available every year or if there will be some sort of back and forth between the two programs as we offer them. So I don't have a schedule yet for you, but we're working on developing that for the new funds, our new ongoing funding, which we're really excited about.
Excellent. Well, that's great news. But you did say you received it, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, that's exciting. So awesome. Well, yeah, all those little details, sometimes it's hard to remember all the bills with all the details that have some nice things additions. So, all right. So Director McCombs, are you leading this? Is there any other additions or any other conversations? Any other
Um,
questions?
Jody, I can lead us into what's ahead if that works for you.
Sure. And I didn't know, is this, because it's, are you talking about the interim committee or this after
Yeah.
action? Because I think we haven't done our after action. Is this just the after action report, or did Director McCombs have something he wanted to add, or is this after the?
So I can work around what Daphne's schedule this morning. I mean, I just
Okay.
real quick context is that, I think my intention around this, and I apologize, I'm like dragging this morning. I woke up with a wicked cold. So if I start coughing or forget what I'm talking about, you'll understand. We had some disalignment, right, with our timing and our discussions last year, and I felt like that there was some rushed discussions and some rushed votes and some rushed policy statements. And and I'm just trying to conjure up sort of what the thought process was going back. And an after action review is really just thinking about what was planned, what actually happened, and how can we improve going forward. And I just thought it would be helpful to maybe try to do a little memory bank work here to think about, are there places where we could have potentially done better at ensuring that this work and the work of the full council was ahead of the legislative calendar and the schedule, as opposed to sort of being responsive. And I don't exactly know how that might work or how we might want to alter the work that we do, but this is what's coming up in my mind as I'm thinking about what we wanted to look at as it relates to how we can be most successful, most responsive to the full council's needs as it relates to providing that advice in those recommendations to both the General Assembly and in the governor's office. So this is what I remember this conversation being about. So if others have thoughts, of course, I'd be more than happy to entertain those as well. But maybe Daphne, based on your calendar this morning, you can just talk about what's ahead with the interim committee. We can always come back to how we might want to be working the calendar better, the legislative calendar, to ensure that this group's as much ahead of the game as it can be, as opposed to sort of in that reactive mode. Does that sound familiar to others?
Yeah. And actually, we've been having that conversation the last couple of meetings. We've developed a calendar. I don't know if you've got to see that, Director McCombs, where we backward planned about where the budget was, the session, and the dropping. And so I feel you, because I have got my COVID shot and my flu shot today. So if I'm not making sense, it's because my head's fuzzy trying to fight 2 vaccines. But so here's the document in the thing. But we figured out, or we thought we needed to be more, as you say, more upstream, literally, to how we're going to have speakers and have this discussion and formulate and have more time to have this deliberation. And I think where we're finding we're going to need to have like 2 calendars, because we're already talking about 2025 now, right? And then the other one is, how are we working with these interim committees? So we'll have one kind of schedule for interacting for this year's legislative parties, but we've already kind of put in place for the 2025. And so I don't know if you've gotten to look at that. That would be great if you could provide some feedback on that. We looked at some dates for budget and the first day of session, and then our meetings, and then trying to plan speakers way ahead so that Courtney and Angela and James are not scrambling trying to find speakers. So hopefully that helps as well. And so, but I think you're right. Last year felt like really rushed because we're so focused on Senate Bill 5 and 1060 and trying to get that passed and have success, that we weren't really giving ourselves enough of a runway to get ready for the next session. So hopefully we have that with this calendar. And thank you, Courtney, for providing that. But I think we're still going to be tweaking it as we go along. So, but I think you're right. We have to be a little more proactive.
Looking at the count, so y'all are way ahead. I apologize for being disconnected from some of the work you've done over the summer. But this is exactly what I think we were talking about. It looks like this group's already far down the road. So we don't have to spend an enormous amount of time reflecting, but if there are comments, we can get to those after Daphne has a chance to get us updated on what's ahead as it relates to the interim session work. And yes, as you said, the full session that will kick off way too soon.
Well, great. Well, we can continue that discussion and look at the calendar. Mr. Morgan.
One quick comment. Oftentimes in groups like this, success breeds success, and you hate to go blow your own horn, but putting a spin on and making groups and public and other agencies aware of our successes and how they were generated generally generates support to do future work. So at some point, I don't know, call it what you want, but we got to have a PR program or a spin program a little bit in the right places to so people understand there is a value to this process. And I don't know how you go about doing that. That's not my cup of tea, but I know it's important.
No, and I'm sure, I don't know, I guess that would be a full Forest Health Council kind of discussion, how we toot our homes. I've been handing out wherever I can go our annual report to state legislators and all kinds of folks. I'm kind of weird that way, but I made sure that they have it in hard copy so that they're reading it. I'm hoping. So, yeah. All right, so let's move on and maybe we can continue this discussion and look at the calendar again. So Daphne, would you, I know you, I didn't, I forgot, and I'm sorry, you have a tight schedule. So would you like to talk about the progress of the Wildfire Matters Interim Committee? Thank you.
Of course, yeah, no worries. Sorry to be taking up so much of you guys' agenda time today. But so as you all know, the committee is at the stage of requesting bills for the upcoming session. They are allowed to draft up to 10 bills, but ultimately 5 can move forward as official committee bills. So some of the concepts that are currently being drafted that will be up for a vote at their next meeting are first, you all's recommendation to pilot a statewide mitigation day for counties and support private landowners with slash removal. So that recommendation was picked up by Senator Cutter. I will say that, given there wasn't too much detail included in the annual report on how to implement this recommendation, I'm not sure what angle Senator Cutter will be taking on this one, but it did receive good support from the committee, so I would expect it will move forward in one form or another. I'll keep running down my list. If you have a question at any time, just please jump in. The next concept that's being drafted is a bill to incentivize collaboration between federal, state, and local agencies for fire mitigation projects and programs, and also to work with non-governmental organizations to disseminate information on the FireWise program. On this one, we're also not too sure what angle Representative Velasco will be taking. We know that there's been, significant collaboration on fire mitigation, whether through our grant programs or project implementation, technical assistance. And, of course, we're in the middle of our organizational assessment to identify how the state agencies can strengthen their collaboration. So we are just going to be keeping a close eye on the details for this one. Again, not too sure what Representative Velasco is envisioning there. The next concept that also came from Representative Velasco is a bill to provide extra support for rural counties navigating grant programs for mitigation. That seems to be relatively straightforward. Not sure if she is going to be focusing on particular grant programs or all wildfire mitigation grant programs, but have heard in my former life at CCI that technical assistance for local governments is needed. So I think that this is coming from that angle. And then I think just the last one on my list here is one that House Minority Leader Lynch brought back, and it's the incentives to promote the timber industry. So if you guys recall from last session, there was a lot of overlap between this bill and Senate Bill 5. So the timber industry bill did not move forward. Minority Leader Lynch ended up signing on to Senate Bill 5, recognizing the duplication there. So we're a little bit confused about why this is coming back. We're not sure if Minority Leader Lynch is going to be picking up elements of the bill from last year or taking a totally new approach. But we will be keeping an eye on that to make sure that it isn't duplicating what we've already accomplished with Senate Bill 5. Oh, thank you, Angela. So it could just be that tax credit component. That's a good point. So I will turn it over to James. I think he's got a couple more bill concepts that might come out of the committee.
Thank you, Daphne.
Thank
James?
you. So there were 3 other concepts that I'm going to touch on. The first one is kind of a concept that's the most, I'm going to say, complete and moving forward. Senator Cutter introduced a bill to the committee to continue funding for the Live Wildfire Ready campaign. That was a bill that passed in 2022 that created this campaign. We worked with the USDA, we worked with the USFS, we worked with DFPC and a bunch of our other partners about this program on how to make your house. It was basically a home hardening program, but for the larger parcel. And so there was a bill that Representative Story now has kind of taken the lead on for continued or additional funding for that. And so basically what the CSFS has done is provide a number to the representative on what a potential extended campaign would look like. And so that's the number we provided. We're not going to be advocating, like, we're in that weird position again, which is where we were in the nursery, but I know that Daphne has reached out and is starting the process on a formal position request with the governor's team. But at least for right now, they at least have the number that we're looking at to fully continue this program. Christy.
Thank you, James. Just quick question on this clarification. Is the funding for the actual campaign, or is the funding the actual funding for the mitigation work and home hardening work?
It's for the actual campaign. So it is like, it is an educational campaign that it has money to last through this next calendar year and next fiscal year. But come 2024, that funding is cut off. And so this bill is just adding additional or continued funding for more campaign and educational materials.
Thank you.
Morgan?
Yeah, Mr. Morgan.
Yes. What was the funding for that program for this year and a half? How much?
So in 2022, we got that bulk funding for both years. So last year and this upcoming year. And that total program piece was $800,000. When our team looked at that, we decided to add an additional $100,000 from our Healthy Forest Vibrant Communities Fund. And so the total cost of that program for the 2 years has been $900,000. So just under $1 million.
Thank you.
Christy?
Okay, one more quick question. I can assume, though, that in that education material, that you guys give the homeowners information on where they can get funding from some of these grant programs.
I believe we do. And here, I'll send this website to you guys. This is basically the home where this is living. We have a lot of educational materials. We're going out to community events. I know that we were at Red Rocks, not Red Rocks. It looked like Red Rocks. But we're passing out stuff like that. And there's a lot of links on that Live Wildfire Ready campaign that'll actually take you to our website where there are links to those grants. There's actually a button at the very bottom that has a toolkit. But yes, I don't think there's like direct access to those grants, but there is a mechanism to get individual homeowners to the grants that they can actually look at. Unfortunately, with this kind of idea, there's not a lot of space out there for individual homeowners to get grants and stuff like that. There's a few tax credit options like that. But because of lack of just direct funding to individual homeowners, this is more campaign driven, but it does direct you to kind of resources that are available out there.
Yeah, just to dovetail on that, Christy, they broke it up into kind of two sections, and one is what can you do as an individual homeowner, and then if you'd like to do more than what those minimum options, then you can get connected with your local wildfire partnership group, your local fire protection district, the entities that help you sort of bulk up, multiple landowners, HOAs and such doing work all together. And then of course it does link you to the various programs you can apply for both at the state and national level. So it was those two entities. What can I do as an individual without help? And then what can I do with help, with my community?
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, James. That's important. So is there other bills there? You said, is that the first one? There's two other ones you were going to mention?
You're on mute.
Thanks. I was gonna say, I'm happy to move on to those other two unless there's more questions regarding that one. Perfect. So the other one that's moving along a little more so is a Senator Cutter bill. She, and I can't remember, Daphne might have touched briefly on this one very high level, but Senator Cutter has created another study on biomass and biochar just as a whole entity. It's a comprehensive study that she's charging the CSFS and CSU to kind of study. Not a lot of, I think, heavy work has been done on that one. I did have a drafter reach out to me. Senator Cutter gave me drafting authority. I had a drafter reach out to me to kind of start to play on what that looks like. Again, waiting for Daphne to kind of finish the process of these formal requests. But the input that I was able to give was, I think Senator Cutter needs to narrow down what a comprehensive study needs to look like. Some suggestions that I gave, specific language were the effects of biomass in forest mitigation, forest management, and forest health. One of the other things that I was able to pass on, and it came from this group, from you specifically, Commissioner, was quote unquote, how much biomass and biochar can be left on the ground for in a safe way, without kind of causing more fuel kind of concerns. And so after I talked with the drafter, I encouraged him to reach out to Senator Cutter, because I said, we can point you in the right direction on who to talk to at CSU, who to talk to at the Forest Service, but we don't actually want to put into legislation what we're actually studying if we're going to be the ones studying it. So we'll take that direction. But for the most part, I'm hoping that Senator Cutter comes with a more narrow field of view on what we're looking to study. That way we can get a better in-depth study on that specific kind of that bill. If there's no questions on that one, I'll move to the final one.
Thank you, James.
The last one is, I'm going to speak very candidly. I'm a little worried about this one. This was a bill that Senator Cutter introduced that is going to, quote unquote, make sure that we're using the best standards and practices when we're doing forest mitigation work and fire mitigation work. It was very, very high level when it was talked about in the interim committee, and it's been super, super high level ever since. She did let me know that she will share the bill with me, and I think I'll share it with this group, especially with Angela and with Daphne, but we're not being provided any input on this one. My concern on this one was, we did have a very brief meeting. Director McCombs was there, and there seems to be an outside influence on this specific bill, with more environmental justice framework bending towards that. And so hopefully waiting to see what that looks like. I've let her know that the Forest Service already has standards and practices and BMPs that we usually do, not usually, that we always do before we do this mitigation work of any kind. I think she's keeping this one rather close. I do know that the bill drafts are due to the Legislative Legal Services by next week. So hopefully I get something today, if not Monday or Tuesday, but waiting to see kind of what that looks like. The only thing that I can kind of mention on this one is that Representative Ron Weinberg out of Loveland is also taking a quote unquote lead on that bill. So there might be an opportunity to be more comprehensive on environmental justice, yes, but actual fire mitigation work that needs to get done. And so waiting to see what that one looks like.
Robert, did you say Representative Weinberg?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, I would love to make sure that we're having lots of conversations with him to help him inform kind of best practices for people actually in there doing the work. So be curious about that. Mr. Morgan had his hand up for a question.
Yes. Just a comment real quick. You're right on target. State Forest Service has been a leader in best management practices. Colorado's had a great best management practices program for years, very successful, good monitoring. And I think somebody needs to present the history of this and how long and successful it has been. And before, I feel like we're kind of trying to reinvent the wheel for a program that's been super successful going back over 30 years that I know of. So that's my only suggestion on that. There needs to be an educational process here somewhere. Thank you.
Director McCombs.
Yeah, I just, and James used the term concern, and we're not necessarily, I'm not, I should say that I'm not necessarily concerned. The NOCO Fireshed Collaborative is also sort of poking around in this space around providing a policy document that would clarify sort of the standards and practices or the SOP for a specific type of treatments. So I think, I think we should always speak candidly and really weigh into these issues, acknowledging that there's just a lot of tension between the amount of resources that are being invested in forestry related activities and that sort of age old tension around how much is enough or how much is too much as it relates to treatment. So this conversation is actually, it's kind of larger than perhaps just this bill, and it would be one that we could continue to sort of at least stay informed around. I think agencies like ours, the State Forest Service, do get a little twitchy when we think about putting bookends on sort of the range of options that exist as it relates to the different dynamic environments in which we engage. But that is, I could tell you, and as you all know well, that's an age-old tension that we're going to continue to wrestle with. And I think it's very, it would be smart and very, very helpful, I think, to the Assembly as well as to the Governor's office to have this group in the stakeholder-driven process. If the timing's right, or if the conversation sort of bubbles in a way that doesn't create too much, to the point where we don't want to get that kind of conflict that makes it such that we can't continue to sort of have these conversations, frankly, as well. But I just want to say there is some underlying tension out there as we start to get to scale. As these resources are starting to trickle down into the system, they're starting to be reflected in lots of work, and that's just raising folks' awareness as they're seeing sizable changes in the environment around in which they live, which all we believe are fundamentally appropriate in the right mix of activities to secure community, to protect communities and try to secure our watersheds and such is really the focus. But I just wanted to acknowledge that conversation is very vibrant right now, and I think it's important that we continue to sort of stay abreast of a lot of those conversations. The bottom line is, again, agencies like ours, and our foresters don't necessarily like to have the quote unquote hands tied, right? But that at the same time, we want to boost public faith and trust in the work that we're accomplishing, and that it's being done in the most, in an ecosystem health driven way, but also in a community health and watershed health driven way. And the intentionality around that can be at times challenging for folks to have conversations around, especially when they start seeing major changes on the landscape that they don't necessarily totally understand, or weren't potentially involved with the decision that led to them. So just want to put some additional context in the room that we just want to make sure that the longstanding practices and the professional approach that agencies have taken to date continue to be available as the challenges that we're trying to face down continue to expand. And I'd be happy to take questions on that. And there's lots of people in this conversation that know exactly the tension that I'm talking about.
Anybody have any questions? Okay, I think we all understand the tension. Thank you for sharing that. Maybe you might need to have conversations. So I want to just kind of be aware of our agenda. So James, is that the last of your presentation? Because we have about 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure we're following our new bylaw changes. And so thank you all for the presentation. Thank you, Daphne, for being here. Thanks, Director McCombs, for all your information. So I wanted to move on to, we have that calendar. If we can move that calendar back up, if you wouldn't mind, Courtney, because we need to kind of look at for our next speaker, so that we can kind of I want to put on the agenda kind of what we're going to do if one of our bills is going forward. And I have a quick question though, before we do that. Are we allowed as a Forest Health Council and I don't know if James or Daphne or something, with all the recommendations that we had, that you guys could maybe take that list and then make comments underneath, like this is going forward, or this is how they talked about this, or I don't know if we could have a list for kind of going back and looking at, sometimes a visual person to see our recommendations to the interim committee and then see what the comments or what the progress is on each one. And maybe that would help some of the other members by me that need kind of a visual thing. I don't know if that's possible or not, or appropriate.
Let me make sure I understand the ask here. We want to kind of have an overlay visual of what the Forest Health Council, those 5 recommendations recommended, versus what the Wildfire Interim Committee review approved, and any nexus between those two things.
Yeah, that would be great. And then, so my next question is, are we only able to advocate or maybe push for the bills that the Wildfire Interim Committee goes forward? If there's one that the rest of the council, the full council, really feels strongly about, is there any mechanism or appropriate to ask others to carry a bill that we feel really comfortable with? Or is that only what we can get through the Wildfire Interim Committee? Since we're still new at this, just curious.
I think that's a question for Daphne, and I guess Angela can jump in. I just know that there are certain parameters on kind of, I don't have the answer. I think that's a Daphne question, just because this is a kind of governor-driven council, and so we might need to get some approval from the governor's office or somebody to make sure that it's in line with that agenda. But yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry.
Jody, I'm happy to jump
Yeah.
in here.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand, Angela. Please, thank you.
Sorry, I didn't put it up. Apologies. Can you restate the question? Is it really about, to what extent can the Forest Health Council advocate on certain bills?
So we had our recommendations, and it sounds like we have a few, but they have some other ones that are overlined that maybe some of our recommendations may not make it in the top 5. And so I didn't know if we had some that we felt really strongly about, like Good Neighbor Authority or some of those others, that we have another avenue to ask for these pieces of legislation to go forward, whether it's through the governor's office or leadership. And I'm just curious if that is, my brain is, I'm trying to think about bylaws, if that's appropriate or if that's something we should do, or, just trying to, curious about that action, or if that's something we should even consider. Just curious about that.
Yeah, of course. So, I think from a leadership perspective, I think legislative priorities for this upcoming session, unfortunately, that ship has largely sailed in the sense that, we all have to decide on our ledge priorities sort of in the summer, and then, elevate those through the process. And Daphne, feel free to chime in here. I think the governor's office, because they've indicated this year that they are not necessarily in a position to put together a separate wildfire package, for instance, I don't necessarily think they are sort of looking around for further legislative recs at this stage. Like, I think we're just a little too far down the line. With all that said, statutorily, thanks, Katie. Statutorily, one of your duties is to make recommendations to the legislature. So, and I guess this is a bit sort of untread territory for us, in the sense that, I think it's a good question. Like, can you sort of have a dialogue with members of the legislature that is sort of separate from, the more formal processes you might ask the DNR to go through and write in terms of highlighting priorities? Honestly, my answer would, I think, generally be yes. I think this council is a forum, and if as a whole, or if as a supermajority, the council, wants to advocate for something, by, for instance, like sending folks to directly make testimony in front of the legislature when they convene this winter. I don't think there's anything to really stop you from doing that. I think the only challenge that might arise is obviously if certain members of the council wanted to advocate for something that, for instance, some of the agency members or Dan Gibbs, didn't agree with, I think then you would just really have to work that out as a council, right? You'd have to have that dialogue in a full council meeting. But yeah, I think as far as sort of having your own conversations with legislators, that's okay. I will just remind folks that following open meetings laws, multiple members of the council should not be meeting separately outside of public meetings, right? So it would not be appropriate, for instance, for several of you, for instance, to meet with a legislator to talk about recommendations outside of a public meeting, right? So that's one thing. And then, but
can I pause you real quick, Angela? I'm sorry,
yeah,
because
go
we're
ahead,
at
Jody.
9:27.
Oh,
And
sorry, yeah.
I think it's, unless we need to maybe have another 5 minutes to talk about next speakers. And I'm sorry to throw this curveball, but maybe this is a question to talk at the full Forest Health Council and coming up in a couple of weeks. But since we have to follow our bylaws, we're almost at 9:30. So I need to ask for a motion for us to extend by 10 minutes to our meeting so we can talk about speakers. I think was it unanimous or majority? I forgot how we landed, but is there a motion? Is there a motion for us to, before we hit 9:30, to
I'll make
extend
that
this meeting?
motion.
Awesome. The second is Mr. Morgan. All those in favor, just 10 minutes. Say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. So go ahead. I'm sorry, Angela. I just want to make sure we were following process and not getting trouble.
Thanks for
But please
for-
continue.
thanks for having me pay attention to the time. No, so it's all to say, like, I don't think there's necessarily anything stopping the council from deciding that they want to send some folks to testify, during the ledge session on certain issues. But I will just say, your opportunities to sort of, influence individual legislators to introduce certain bills, for instance, I think are somewhat limited at this stage until you actually get into the ledge session.
Okay, so and I'm not looking to try to anything that's against what agencies, because I'm just thinking about that list, because we worked really hard on condensing that list. We had so many things we were really passionate about, and so we put a lot of work into that. So I'm just wondering if there was a way, if there's one of those items on the list that we all felt so passionate about, that if that's something we could, push. So I'm just curious, because I don't know how that would work. So, and maybe it's just this process where we put these forward, and maybe that's something we look is going forward. So Julia, you had your hand up. So, she's on her phone. Julie, do you have your hand up? Do you have a question or comment?
Sorry, my buttons are not working well. I was just going to ask if understanding we couldn't go to the legislatures as a group, we could invite them to come to one of our meetings, though, is where my head was at that moment.
That's a great idea.
That's true. And you do have 2 members of the legislature on the council, right? So that's an easy avenue. That's a good idea. But you are reminding me, I think we'll add to the agenda for October, just sort of a recap of how to appropriately function during the ledge session, and a reminder about, not meeting offline with multiple members. So I'll make sure to add that.
Okay, so I want to just get back to, and thank you. So maybe this is something to chew on for our next meeting. So, okay, so I want to get through the rest of the agenda, because we have to talk about next potential topics and speakers. So thank you, Courtney, again, for bringing up that list so we can look at the list or calendar.
Did you want the list of topics or the calendar?
Let's look at the calendar first.
Okay.
So we're here on October, what did it say, 6th. So we have some openings, so staff outreach. So I thought we need to kind of decide in this next couple of weeks what we'd like to have for potential speakers so they can start to reach out. before the full council. So so just kind of showing that where we're at on that list, so they have time to reach out. So, so let's go to our list of potential speakers now. Okay. Okay, I guess I would ask staff if there's one that you think is on there that would be easier to set up for our first meeting with speakers, and less capacity building, like if there's and I know if we all have any of them jump out for anybody. Do we have the report from Director Gibbs from the National Commission or was that November, October that's coming out? From the
I believe we
Biden-
do have a report from the Federal Fire Commission. I can send that out after this meeting.
Can we have you want to do that one for our first presentation so we can kind of see what the federal recommendations are? What does everyone think about that? Could we get a speaker for that? Angela.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Jody. So we do have it on the agenda to provide a brief sort of summary at the October all council meeting. So I think the question is, would you like to dive deeper, basically spend your whole hour sort of diving deeper into the recommendations? I mean, there are a ton. There are 148 in the document, so you could certainly spend much more than an hour. And we could try and get Director Gibbs. If we can't, either I could provide that presentation or we could try and get Mike Morgan, who's also on the commission.
Yeah, that would be great. And then I see that Pat Dorsey talks about an update for Gates Family Foundation. Actually, that's the second one I was thinking about. So, and she says a prescribed fire update. And I think, so my suggestion, and so how about we have our next three topics? We have maybe an update on this Federal Fire Commission report. And then the next one, do a Gates Family Foundation update, and then do the update on the prescribed fire update. Because that's, I think we just had a meeting on that. I think that's still kind of pulling some information together. So how does that sound for the first three, for the next three meetings? I can't see many of you. Can I get a thumbs up? Thumbs up? Thumbs down? Anybody opposed to that next three meetings? Let me just kind of knock this out, and then staff can work on the next three meetings. Does that sound like a good plan? Christy?
That was an accident. Sorry.
Oh, it's Friday. Any other comments or feedback on that? Okay, I think then we have our next three meetings. Does that help you, staff? Or Angela, Courtney? Cool, that's great. That makes it easy. Okay, and then Mr. Morgan.
I guess one that I would like to have time to develop a really good program or speaker for, but I think one of the most important ones that we've got to deal with, in my mind, is exactly how much biomass can be left on the landscape, because it drives the cost of all this work and drives the community acceptance. It's an aesthetics thing. And I think in the tensions that Director McCombs was talking about on our work issues, that's going to be one of the single most important ones. So at some point, I'd like to make sure that happens. I'd like to make sure that we have some really qualified people coming up with some suggestions. I'm fine with the order that you have for the first three meetings. And maybe that would give us some time to look in who we want to have make a presentation there. Thank you.
That sounds like a good item for meeting number 4. So, so does that sound like a plan? Okay. And I just wanted to let you know that Larimer County just received a Department of Legislative Affairs wildfire mitigation strategy grant of $150,000. So I guess our internal group is working on a strategy about biomass here separately in Larimer County. So I'm going to be kind of in that. So listening in, and I can kind of share with what that report looks like. Courtney.
Yes, I would like to confirm. So according to the calendar, we have presentations beginning in 2024. Would you all like to move forward a little bit and start having presentations at the next meeting? Is that what you're indicating?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're ready to maybe hear from this Federal Fire Commission and it will be kind of good that we'll have a kind of an overview at the full Forest Health Council and then dig in with with our own meeting. I think that's a great idea. I mean, I think that I can think about it and then ask more questions and maybe we can have a further presentation. So.
Okay. That sounds great.
Awesome.
We will work on finding some great speakers for these topics.
Awesome. Okay. So trying to be aware of the time. It sounds like unless there's some objections to any of that progression, let's talk real quick, Courtney, about the logistics. Just want to make sure if anyone had any questions about the upcoming full council. So.
Sure, I can just give an overview, and then if people have questions, they can ask. So the full council meeting is going to be on Wednesday, October 25th in Salida. Following the meeting will have a virtual or in-person option. Following the in-person meeting, people who are in person are invited to a tour of the Poncha Pass Forestry Project. There is work being done there, completed by many different agencies. So that'll be a really nice opportunity to hear about collaboration that's happening on the ground and big successes happening on the ground. Following that tour, there is a hybrid meeting between the Forest Health Council, the Colorado Forest Health Council, and the Envision Chaffee County Council, so that the two groups can hear from each other and talk about how they can support each other further. So both meetings have a hybrid option, but the tour is only available in person. For people who are wanting to travel to Salida, the State Forest Service is really generously offering to cover travel expenses. Again, that's something that James can help you with a little bit more specifically. We are working to get a block room set up for people who would like to stay at a hotel before and after the meeting, and I will send out some confirmation once that's been tied up.
Thank you. Anybody have questions for Courtney? Okay, well, I look forward to seeing you all in a couple of weeks. It's going to be a busy month for me again, so it'll be nice to come down and slide in. Hopefully there's some kind of color left. So any other questions, concerns about the topics that we discussed today already? I appreciate everyone hanging in there for a few more minutes, and I appreciate everyone's service on this council. We have a lot going on, and I think the next few months we'll be busy with lots of discussions. So thank you all for your time today, and we really appreciate your work and being here and being present so we can have a quorum. So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Awesome. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Everybody wants to? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you so much. Happy Friday, everyone. Take care.
Have a nice weekend, guys.
Take care.